What do you do when your recovery goes from feeling steady and strong to feeling weak and wobbly? Today on Finding Traction podcast, we're going to talk about this. What happens when your recovery feels wobbly? Join us.
Guys ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Just got back from my walk here. It's June of 2020 and got rained on. And, it's supposed to be getting ready for summer. I opened my weather app this morning and looked at the next 7 days. There wasn't a picture of the sun anywhere. So for you who live in sunny places, I feel jealous of you. Up here in what would be the northwest or the southwest of Canada, it's green for a reason. And so I was trying to keep my encouragement up. So I want to talk to you about this word wobbly. If you know anything about American history, there's and politics aside, however you feel about the Iraq War back in the 90s, there's this famous story about the Iron Lady of the United Kingdom, Margaret Thatcher. And back in the 90s, Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait, and George Bush Sr. had taken over from Ronald Reagan, and he was trying to decide whether or not he was going to try to push out, Saddam Hussein and send him back to Iraq. And he was, going, wobbly or wavering on this. And he had a conversation with the Iron Lady. And this was the quote that the Iron Lady said to George Bush Sr. Now remember, George, this is no time to go wobbly. Wobbly, such a great word. And one of my favorite word pictures to describe recovery is like a spinning top. I've used that picture on if you're listening to this on YouTube, you will see that picture. If you're listening to this by podcast Finding Traction, you will of course just have to imagine a top. But you know how tops work. When you start spinning them, they spin tight and true. There's just a tight spin. But over time, as the centrifugal force begins to wane, you begin to detect a slight wobble. And then over time, it becomes more pronounced. The tremor goes from, something to a more of a pronounced wobble. And we all know what's going to happen. Eventually, that top is going to lose its force and it's going to topple over on its side, a spent force. Now, in a spinning top picture, wobbly is not a good thing. In our recovery, I would submit to you that going wobbly is not a good thing. You say, well, what are the things that cause us to throw us off kilter? If you take a top and you get it spinning on a table, but then you flick it or touch the side of it, of course it causes it to spin off, wildly, in terms of that. You want to leave it alone. Now, the point here is this. What is it that causes us to go from strong, straight, and true, a tight spin, to going, man, I just feel completely off? Well, it could be a number of things. It could be some trigger or a pop-up that happens on your computer. About a month ago, I had something pop up. I don't know if it was from another search I'd done, and it was just something that just seemed in a nefarious, negative way, perfectly tailored to my arousal template. It took me weeks to get that out of my mind. I wanted to see it. I wanted to check it out. So it could be something inadvertent like that. Or it could be that perhaps you edged and saw something or looked at something, and now you feel like you went from having this tight, true spin to having this distinct wobble in your recovery. Now you find yourself beginning to obsess about it, beginning to think about scenarios that perhaps you can look at that again or view that. Now this is a true story. Yesterday, I was looking up, I want to build a fence here in our backyard. It's going to take quite a bit of work. I'm pretty handy. And so I'm going to build a big fence. And I was doing some searches on building a fence. And right in the middle of doing those searches, it sent me to comments that different people had made. And somebody had put up as their profile picture, a pinup picture. And it was just like, it's like, give me a freaking break. A pinup picture as somebody's profile picture when I am looking how to build a fence. It's just not fair. So it could be that throws you off or makes you feel wobbly. It could be that maybe all of a sudden there's some new avenue or technology device that is now available in your home, and you know that you could act out on that, and you start thinking about opportunities to act out on that. Maybe all of a sudden you have an app that you now realize that it gives you a back door to begin to go back to your old pursuits. It could be any number of things that take you from feeling strong and steady to weak and wobbly. Now, let me throw another one out. It could be this. It could be maybe you just bummed out. Something's happened and you just in an emotional state where you're just discouraged. Maybe that takes you off your game, off your stride, causes a wobble in your spin. It could be the rain that, you look on your app and see the next 7 days is rain. Maybe it's just a super discouraging set of circumstances that are now happening. And all of a sudden you feel like, man, I just feel like I'm just wobbling everywhere. I just feel like this is really, my recovery is super contested. Everything feels tenuous. I'm going to let you in on a secret here. Even in long-term recovery, it might be days, weeks, months, or even years since you've engaged in, for example, looking at porn and being involved in porn behaviors. It could be even years. But I think, and as I talk to people, even people in long-term recovery, they go through seasons where they go from feeling strong and steady, and something happens or they see something, and now they feel weak and wobbly. So this is not a lesson just for you, Ian, who are starting out. This can happen at any time and at any season. So, are there any ways to unwobble yourself? Now, that's definitely not a word, but it is here. How do we unwobble ourselves? Is that even possible? Or do we just have to go to the inevitable fall and then have to deal with the consequences of that? But is there any way, once there's a wobble in our walk, so to speak, to begin to unwobble it? Well, I'm going to give you a few ideas. But the first thing I would say is this. We have to recognize that overconfidence is the enemy. Again, it doesn't matter how many days, weeks, months, or years you've been at this, you are not as strong and steady as you think. And overconfidence will get you every time. There's a verse in the Bible that says, beware of those who think they stand, lest they fall. It's in the book of 1 Corinthians. And there's an old British band called the Alwyn Wall Band back in the 70s. I do remember the 70s. And they have a great line in one of their songs. Those who lose their way are not always the beginners. And so let me just say, I would just say, whatever you can, just kill the whole idea of overconfidence. Don't be surprised if all of a sudden you feel like things were going so well, I've got this lick. Don't be surprised if all of a sudden you feel like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this next day or week without going back to behaviors. It will happen. Don't be surprised when it happens. So it goes back to the question. If it does and when it does, how do we unwobble ourselves? Here's the first one. I would say that we need to redouble our disciplines. Chances are, if you've been at this a while, you started to perhaps slack off or back away from some of the very things that you did when you were high and excited about this new journey of recovery. You may have been coming out of a massive consequence or something, and now you're at a point where you're going. Early on you were going and listening to podcasts every day. Perhaps you were reading podcast literature. You were calling a recovery buddy every day, and you were motivated, and things were going great. And after a while, your motivation was high. But after a while, you went along and you felt like you were doing pretty good, and things began to, you just began to, in one sense, settle back from some of that early commitment and that early energy. Well, let me say, if you feel wobbly, it's a great reminder to re-inject some of that energy back into your walk. I felt, you can tell this is probably coming out of my own journey, but I felt in the last few weeks more wobbly than I felt in the last few months. And as a result, I've started to go back to that. I went and ordered the book called Repairing Your Broken World by Gordon MacDonald. And that was a book that I just wanted to remind myself of the challenges of what it is like to repair a broken world. And it was a part of my redoubling some of my disciplines. Let me switch to a bit of a different wobbling example to make this point. The old Harlem Globetrotters things. There's people that could take a basketball and spin it on their finger. I could never do that. But you get the idea. You've all seen that. Well, I don't know how they do that, but they get the basketball spinning on their finger. Well, eventually, if you just leave the spinning basketball on your finger, what will happen? Well, it will eventually lose its force and it will just fall off your finger. Except if you slap the ball and you keep the force going so that the spin remains tight and steady, and you've seen it all the time. Well, I would submit to you that slapping of the ball and keeping that force going is the same idea as redoubling some of those early things that you did when you started out strong in your recovery. Now here's the next one. Redraw your boundaries. I used to go to a university called University of British Columbia, UBC, and I used to go out for jogs and be down. It's a beautiful university. It's kind of on a peninsula, and you go out very quickly. You get to these cliffs, and you can look out over the whole ocean and the Museum of Anthropology down there. It's just unbelievable in terms of its beauty. But what would happen is they had all these fences that they built right next to the cliffs. Well, people would cut holes in the fences, but so what would happen over time is people would cut holes in the fences, or there would be erosion, and parts of the cliff, would begin to fall away. And so either the net result is you could either get through the fences, or the edge of the cliff was close to the fences. And I don't know what it is. Either we make boundaries that are protective boundaries for ourselves, whether or not the erosion happens and the cliff edge comes closer to the fence, or we simply cut holes in the fences, or we let the fences get closer to the edge because we feel confident. Remember that word, confident? And all of a sudden, we find that some of the boundaries that were safety for us, we begin to not take seriously anymore. And I would say in this time when you're feeling wobbly, now is a time to redraw your boundaries. Go back to some of those boundaries. Those boundaries were needed for you for a period of time. They might be long-term boundaries. And now that you're feeling wobbly, it's a chance to go back and redouble those boundaries. I'll give you an example. One of the things during this COVID, one of the things me and my wife like to do at night is just to sit and cuddle and watch a show at night. And we like dramas, crime dramas and different things. And I don't know what's going to happen in a year or two, because it seems to be harder and harder to find good shows. And maybe in a year a year from now, when they haven't been making any shows, there's going to be nothing on TV. But, one of the things is we were on Netflix, and there were shows on Netflix that, we were watching. And in order to watch those shows, we had to change the ratings on those. Now, I would watch those with her and, keep the fast forward button. Now, it's not for everybody, but that's just the way it works for us. So what had happened was we had changed the settings on Netflix so that we could have a broader variety of shows that we could watch. Well, all of a sudden now, my mind starts to think about, oh my goodness. For example, today, it's the first day that my son, who was back living with us for a while, he's off at work. My wife is off at teaching today. So guess what I was thinking last night? I was thinking, oh my goodness, tomorrow I'm going to be at home. And you know what? Those Netflix boundaries, they're not there. I can watch a whole bunch of stuff on Netflix. So what did I do? Well, I had a choice. What I did is I said to my wife before we go to bed, I said, hey, can we set those settings back to where they were before? Those shows, not only do I not have access to those shows, they don't even appear, as listed shows. That's just some, honest things of what I did last night. And so today, when I'm here all alone, I've redrawn the boundaries in my life. The best intention part of me was protective of the worst intentioned part of me. Redraw your boundaries. And that comes from self-awareness, knowing, you know what, I'm feeling vulnerable. I'm feeling like there's that I need right now to redraw some boundaries, or I need to be really firm about those boundaries. Number 3, I would say to somebody, if you're feeling wobbly, you need to shorten your focus. I read a lot of military fiction. I love military fiction, Bernard Cornwell and guys like that. Take, for example, the way that the Danes or the Saxons fought. They would use what's called shield walls. And when you were in battle and you were in the heat of battle, all you were supposed to do was focus on the person, your enemy in front of you. You shouldn't be looking around trying to decide whether or not you're winning the battle. Make your focus really short and specific. AA came up with this great phrase. I'm sure it was AA. And it was this: one day at a time. The idea is you never say, I'm going to not drink for the next month, because that feels overwhelming when you're struggling with not drinking right now, or you're thinking about driving down and picking up a 6-pack. Here's the whole idea. You simply say, I don't know about tomorrow, but today I'm not going to drink, or I'm not going to look at porn. And when you're in a super contested time, you go, you know what, I don't know about this afternoon, but this morning I'm not going to. So the whole idea of shortening your focus is this: when you're in a battle and things feel tenuous, just take things the next step at a time. And eventually, you might even say, you know what, I'm not going to look at porn today. Tomorrow's another day. I don't know about tomorrow, but all I can tell you is today, that is where I'm at. Tomorrow will take care of itself. I heard that somewhere. Number 4. When you feel like you're in a wobbly, conflicted place, call it out. There's nothing more disarming and nothing that seems to break that inevitable chain of I'm eventually going to act out, than when you call somebody and tell them how you're doing. that has a way of just popping the balloon. You know, it takes the whole air out of the inevitableness, I don't know if that's a word, inevitableness that you're eventually going to fall anyways. When you talk to somebody, you tell somebody, I'm feeling shaky right now, or I'm going through a tough season, you know, and you do that and you get their support. It just seems to shine light into the situation. You know, it's when I hide it, it's when I don't tell anybody, that's when the wobble becomes more and more pronounced and eventually leads to a full scale going downhill. So those are just some ideas that I would suggest that you can do. Here is the good news. If you practice vulnerability and honesty, and to a degree self-awareness in how you're doing, eventually you will come through that season and you can make the top spin strong and steady and true again. And you don't have to act out to get there. I wish I could say life will never have another season of wobbles, but I don't think that's realistic. So I hope that is helpful for you. So until then, keep your top spinning, whatever it is, whatever you need to do along that. So have a great day and keep spinning towards that goal. We'll see you next time.